environment, it doesn't have to necessarily be in the same directory as your project. I like to keep all my virtual environments in a separate directory. So to create a virtual environment, you just need to do Python dash m when, and we can just give it a directory name. So for example, uh, Django demo. So this will create a folder called Django demo here. And to activate a virtual environment, you have to go and like source the files. Now for Windows users, I'm on Linux, so all I have to do is source Django demo and into the bin folder, and just there's a script called activate. That is what you have to do. So for Windows users, you will have to so this is a really good reference that I'm sharing in the chat, and I'll put it also in the group that we have. So this tells you all about the virtual environment. So as you can see here, uh, to activate virtual environments, all we have to do is we need to go into the when into the scripts folder and call the activate.bat script or the activate.ps1 script. Is everyone following?
Yeah.
Okay. So now we can go into creating the project folders now. So I'll just go into my preferred directories. So first thing we need to do is we need a Django installed. So after activating the virtual environment, we'll just do pip install Django. So that installs Django and all of the necessary dependencies for Django. And after Django is installed, what we have to do is it is preferable to maintain a requirements file because that keeps it easy to maintain and recreate the projects on different machines. So we'll create a requirements file. So just name it requirements.txt, and you can just so to know the version of Django that you have installed, you can do pip freeze, and you can see that Django 5.0.6 is installed. So you can just copy this and put it into your requirements.txt file, or you can just type it out on your own. Django double equals to 5.0.6. The 5.0.6 is nothing but the version that you installed, and it is uh, recommended to keep a track of the requirements. So now to create a Django project, what you have to do after installing Django, just type django-admin start project and the name of your project. So I'll just do Django underscore demo. So this will create a folder named Django underscore demo, as you can see. So inside the Django underscore demo folder, this will be the file structure. So you will have the inside the Django underscore demo folder, you will have a folder named Django demo, which will have 4 files. The 2 files that we will be dealing with the most are settings.py and urls.py. And there is a manage.py file that is used to manage the Django project. Is everything clear till now?
Yes.
So first things first, this basic file structure. So all of the settings for our Django project will lie in the aptly named file settings.py. So if we go into the file, it has all of the settings, basic settings that Django requires, and we don't need to change much. Like if we create something, like for example, we create our own apps, so we'll need to add them here, and certain small settings we would need to change. Uh, so let's also install Django REST framework because we will be using that to create our APIs. So again, to install Django REST framework, we just do pip install Django REST framework. It is all the same word, no underscores or no dashes or nothing. I hope you can read it, all the text on the screen.
Yes.
Okay. So so installing Django REST framework, and again we'll do the same thing. We'll move the requirements.txt file into the current folder inside the project, and now again we'll do pip freeze and find what version of Django REST framework we have installed. We can just copy that and put that into the requirements.txt file. So now again, after like we want to clone this project onto another machine, we can just do pip install dash r requirements.txt, and this will install all of the requirements that were written inside the requirements file. So it makes it simpler to recreate our project everywhere. So now first things first, we can start building the app. To build the app, we need to partition it. It is better to partition code into different sections to keep it clear. So here this is a very simple project, so we'll only need one app with all of the main functionality into the same folder. So uh, we can just do Python in the root directory of our project. We can do Python manage.py start app, and we can name it anything that we like. So here we'll be tracking music and stuff, so I'm just naming it music. So we have now this creates a new folder called music, as we can see. So if we look at now the folder structure of our app, we had this Django demo folder earlier. We had the manage.py file. Now this has included a music folder which has a lot of other files, and we'll be mostly working with the models and views.py file, and also a little bit with the admin.py file. So the models.py file is used to manage the database models that we'll be creating. A model in Django is nothing but the tables that we create in a database. So the model will keep a track of what columns will be there in the database and what will be the data type of those columns. Is that clear? So now to continue, so first we'll obviously need to create the database structure that we want. So we'll go into the music folder and into the models.py file. So the models.py file has a single line of code in it that is just importing the basic Django models module. So to create a model, what we have to do is we'll define a class, and we can name it the name of the table that we want. So for example, we'll create a class called album, and in the album we need to specify models.model, because we'll be inheriting certain properties from the model class that Django has defined already. Now in this, we need to name the fields that we need in the columns. So for example, we need album name. So for album name, and then we'll do models dot what type of column this will be. So this will be nothing but a char field. So it is nothing but a character field, a set of characters, and we have to always specify a max length for character fields. So I am just setting it to 100 right now. And now for album name, and now we can also like create if you want another column like name band name that created the album. So we'll do models.char field max length. Again, we am setting the max length. Now also, if you like, there are a lot of different data types that we can store in a database. For example, like release date. So we can do release date is equal to models dot date time field, because we need to save the date and time of the release of the album. So this is that. And now there are a lot of different model fields that we can use. So a good reference, it is the most recommended reference that everyone uses, is the Django documentation. This will have a list of all of the fields that Django provides us. For example, if you see on the right side, you can see field types: auto field, big auto field, and there's binary, boolean, char, date, time. So there's a lot of default fields that Django provides, and it is always recommended to use these. And mostly all of our functionalities will be completed by this. Is this clear? Okay, so we have a release date over here, and now looking at the reference, we see that there is a date field also, which seems more appropriate. So we can just change it to a date field. And now let's create another table that will be uh, tracks, like the tracks inside the album. So models.model, that is what we always need. And now we know that a track is always inside an album. There are singles, but we are only considering album tracks. So the class a track will always be linked to an album. So to specify relationships between two different tables, Django provides us with different types of relations, and that is for with all databases, like one-to-many relationships, many-to-many relationships, and one-to-one relationships. These are majority the broad types. So one-to-many relationships. So for example, a track will be in an album. So a track only has one associated album, but an album will have many associated tracks. So this is a one-to-many relationship. This will be called a one-to-many relationship from an album to a track. So to define a one-to-many relationship, Django provides a field called foreign key. So we can name it album. The associated album is equal to models dot foreign key 2. So now we need to define it is to which model in the database. We name it album. And here we need to handle what should happen to a track if the associated album gets deleted. So if the associated album gets deleted, it is very obvious that we need to delete the tracks also with the album. So what we can do is we can specify an on delete function, which is nothing but cascade. So cascading is what? If an album is deleted, all of the related tracks will also be deleted. So the deletion is cascading down from the album to the tracks. There are a lot of other options that Django provides. That is model. So it will provide something called null, set null. So it will just set the album to null. Then there is restrict and protect. That will stop the deletions. If, for example, if we delete an album and there are still tracks associated with it, we can delete. It will stop the deletions. Yes, Adi.
Like I just had two questions. So, does foreign key just mean that you're like getting the particular class album you've already created into this new class track?
So this is a way of that Django has defined for us to define relationships between tables. So here we are just specifying that a track will be related to an album and only a single album.
Okay. All right. And what exactly does the cascade function do?
See, as I explained, the cascade function, for if I explain as an example, if you delete an album from your database, it makes sense that all of the tracks that are associated with that album should also be deleted.
Yeah.
So that is what a cascade automatically handles. That on deletion of the album, just cascade the deletion down to the tracks and delete the tracks associated with it.
All right. Cool. Thanks.
Yeah. So here we have defined a foreign key. A foreign key is how we name a one-to-many relationship in Django and in a lot of other database management systems. So we have album. Now we can also define the other required fields like song or track name. So it will be a char field again because it is a small field. And here we can also have like a description of the track. So we can like do a description field, and obviously descriptions will be much longer than the name of the track. So there is another field that Django provides called text field that does not have any limits on lengths. But for char fields, we need to specify max lengths. Here also it is an optional field that you can specify, but it is not really required. So we have a very basic database structure here. Now also looking at it, we can also modify this, like the band name thing, to a foreign key. Like we can list band names in our database, but right now for this scope, it is too complicated. We just need to learn the basics. So I'm not doing that. So here we have two basic things. Now to implement these database structures in the database that we'll be using. So as we can see in the settings.py file that we had, there is a database configuration that has been already provided by Django. So Django by default uses an SQLite database backend. So SQLite is really strong and really fast for small scaled applications, and for right now we'll not be changing that. But if we want to change the database uh, backend, like if you want to use like something like MySQL or Postgres, so we can easily look up the database backends on the Django docs and we can change it. Here we can see these are the officially supported database backends that Django provides: Postgres, MySQL, and SQLite, and Oracle DB and MariaDB also. So this has proper guides on how to change all of this, but this is we can do it from the docs. So I'm not going into it here, and we'll be using the default SQLite implementation. So now to convert the models that we defined in this file, what we have to do, we can do first we need to list the app that we created, music, the app music that we created, and we need to tell Django that please include this in our program. So we can go into the settings.py file, and there will be an installed apps array, as you can see here. So in the installed apps array, we can just do, we can just say music, that is the name of the app we created, and apps dot music config. This is what we need to include here. So what this is doing, I just like to add a comment here like custom apps, so that separates the by default apps that Django includes and the apps that we have created. So if we now, what we have said is music.apps.musicconfig. So what this is actually referring to is inside the music folder, as you can see, there is an apps.py file that has a basic config for this application. So it is just referring to that, and it is telling Django that please include this application in our program. So now after including that in the settings file, what we can do is we can go back to the root directory of our project that I named Django demo. So it should be the folder that has the manage.py file. So now what we can do is python manage.py, and we can do make migrations. So what migrations is I did not like activate the virtual environment, so it was. So what we can do is we can make the migrations. Now for migrations, so see, when I made the migrations, it said migrations for the app music, and it created a model named album and a model named track. So this is nothing but converting the Python code that we have written, and it understood that and it converted it into SQL commands that will be run on the database by Django. So we don't directly need to deal with the database, and Django handles all of the transactions with the database by itself. So this is a much safer way and a very consistent way of transactions with the database. So now we have made the migrations. Now we need to tell Django to apply the migrations to the database. So what we'll do, Python manage.py migrate. So this migrated all of the migrations that were made. Now there are a lot of extra migrations but these are default migrations that Django already has. We don't need to we don't care about that, but we have one, this music 001 initial. So that was the migration that we created, and it has also gotten applied. So now there is a table. There are two different tables for one for album and one for track in the Django database. And now if we look in the root folder, we also have a file called dbsqlite 3. So this is actually the database that we have, and it is being stored in this particular file itself. Now, if you want to manage all of this, Django provides a really good utility called its admin pages. So what we just need to do is register the models that we created onto the admin page. So for that, we need to first import them from the models.py file. I am doing all of these changes in the music folders admin.py file. So here we can import the models that we created. So what we can do is from music dot models, because we wrote the code in the models file, import album, that was one of the models that we created, and track, that is the other model that we created. And now what we have to do is admin dot site dot register album and admin dot site dot register track. So what this does is this lists our created models, the album and the track in the Django admin file. So now we need to run a local web server so that we can test out all of this things that we have created. So to do that, we have to go again back to the root directory of the project, the one with the manage.py file, and we can do python manage.py run server. So this creates a very basic web server that can be run. See, as we can see, it and this is a consistent process. So this will keep on checking any changes that we make in the files, and it will restart the server with the new changes. So now, as we can see, it is saying starting development server at HTTP, and it is an address. So if we just go to that address, this is nothing but a localhost 8000. So when we go to this, we should get a page like this, that the install works successfully. And because we have included the admin pages, so we can go to /admin, and we'll have an interface like this. Now to access this, we need to have a super user. So to create a super user, we can again, every management that we are doing with this Django utility will be done by manage.py. Yes, Aditya.
I wanted to ask that I was working on some different project on Django before this. So when I use the start server thing, it directs the URL to the previous project. So is there any way I can change it to the music one?
Uh, I didn't understand, how is it redirecting it to an older project? Have you not stopped the server for the older project?
No, no, I did that, and I tried
You
that
can
again
run
also right
multiple
now.
projects on different ports, I think. You can specify the port in that command.
Yeah, we can specify the port and run server. So any command that you don't understand, you can just do dash dash help, and that will list out. So this will list out all of the extra options that is there. So for example, we can specify a address port. So we can just do, so if I stop this server and do it run server, and if I specify 3000, initially we had gone to 8000, as you can see, but now I'll have to go to 3000. So you can specify a different host.
All right, thanks.
Yeah. So getting back to creating the super user, so we'll run the server here, and we can do python manage.py and create super user. Now super user is something that has access to every database model, and they can change, create and update anything they want. So we can do create super user, and this will ask you for a username. So I'll give it mine, and now here it is a local database, so it doesn't matter about the email address, but actually we should be using true email addresses, and set any password you want, and it will ask for a confirmation. Now we can use the same credentials that we created here, and you can log in. It is on localhost 3. As you can see, we have the music app listed in a separate section with albums and tracks, both of our models here. Now we can create an album. We can go on to the album thing and we'll have a add album button. So we can add an album. We can just say a test album 1, and I'm just giving it a random name, and I'm just setting the release date to today. So I can save this and we can see an album object is created. Now, this is nothing but a string representation of the album. So this is what by default Django provides, and we can overwrite almost everything there is. So now, for example, we want to create a new track. We can add track, and it is asking me for an album. And as we had defined it as a foreign key, it is providing me options with all of the albums in the database. Currently, we have only one. There is one here, and I can see track one and test track one, and I can save, and this will be created. Similarly, I can create another track and it won't stop me from creating two. And there are two tracks in our database now. So this is how we basically manage and deal with the databases we have. And a lot of the customization options that Django has is listed in the docs. And the docs are pretty good. You can read them and understand everything. So now moving on to uh, creating APIs and login pages. Yes, sir.
No, it is fine, Raj. I was just mentioning one thing here that as you can see that there are multiple albums are possible and tracks are also possible. So album should have a unique ID also. I think that part we have missed. So is there any way to add a unique ID for every album and every track now?
So Django by default adds the IDs and primary keys to the models. So as we can see in the URL, it is going to album and it has a unique ID of 1. We don't need to explicitly specify it. Django automatically creates it for us.
Okay.
So moving ahead with creating APIs. So for example, if we want to create APIs, we have a framework known as Django REST framework that is used to create and manage APIs. So we all have already installed it. Uh, so to create APIs now, what Django calls every page or every link that we visit, it calls it a view. So whatever we create and whatever we need to access and all of the database accesses and modifies that we do, we'll mostly be doing them in the views.py file. So now first thing, we need to set up Django REST framework properly in our app. We haven't done that. We can go into the settings.py file that we had, and now we are technically the Django REST framework is a plugin into Django. It is not a default part of Django. So I'll just add it here, and all of this is from the Django REST framework documentation. So almost all the documentations have an installation guide. So we are just following all of that. That we installed Django REST framework, and now we are adding the REST framework app to the installed apps of Django. So what we'll do is REST underscore framework, and please make sure that after you add anything to the installed apps thing, add a comma after it, because this is a list. But due to the formatting, sometimes we might forget to add commas, and that will cause errors. So adding the REST framework to the installed apps has configured a lot of the defaults that REST framework provides with Django. Yes, sir.
No, please go ahead.
Uh, so, uh, and there are certain default permissions also that we'll have to set, but currently all of the defaults that REST framework has will work for us. But as we move forward, we might have to come back and change them. So, uh, going into now, let's create. So we have all of the data in a database. Now we need to convert that data into a format that Python understands and convert it into fields that Python understands. So we have album. This will also return objects from the database that have Python like fields, but because we are creating APIs and mostly we'll be returning JSONs. So we need an easy way to convert objects into JSONs. So that is where a REST framework provides something called serializers. So we are going to create basic serializers for every model that we have. So we'll create a new file here named serializers.py. So in the serializers.py file, we'll import a basic framework that DRF provides for the serializer. So what we'll do, from REST framework from REST framework import serializers. So this helps us create serializers in this file. So again, similarly like models, we need to create a class for every serializer that we create. So there are a lot of helper functions and helper classes that Django REST framework provides, and uh, if we go into the API guide and we look into the serializers, this is again the docs for serializers. There's a lot of stuff that REST framework provides us, and we'll be using one of them. So everyone must have done the basic Django, like normal Django tutorials. One of Sir had provided, and in the informal group, I had also provided some resources for all of this. I hope everyone had gone through them.
Yes.
So in that, we also use something called forms that Django provided. So serializers are something similar, but serializers are mostly used for APIs because that will not have HTML forms that will be returned. We'll be using JSON objects to communicate with all of this. And JSON objects are represented by dictionaries in Python. So creating a serializer. So what have we made till now? We have albums and we have tracks. So first we'll create a serializer for albums. So we can name it class album serializer, and it should inherit a basic framework that REST provides for serializers. And as the album serializer is linked to a model, they also provide a model serializer uh, class that we can inherit, and this has a lot of helper functions, and it easily converts the data that we get from the database and to a JSON or any output format that we require. So here, to define a model serializer is linked to a model. So we can create a class called meta inside the album serializer, and we have to name the model. So here, looking at the docs, we see, as we can see, we need to create a meta class. So we just go model equal to album, and we need to import this first. So from music dot models import album. So we are mapping the album serializer to the album model that we have created. And if we want to exclude some fields, for example, like uh, we don't want the uh, let's look at how album looks. So if you don't want the release date, for example, for some reason in the data that we are going to get from the serializer, we can just say album underscore name and band underscore name. And now this is a serializer. Now, just to show you why are we using serializers, what I'll do is, again, Python manage.py file provides a lot of utilities that we can use. For example, it also provides a shell. So this will create a Python shell that has all of the basic Django interactions loaded for you. So we just, for example, if we want to fetch something from the database and we don't want to access the admin side, You can do it from the shell also. So first we need to import the model. So from music dot models import album. So we have the album, and if I have saved this, yes. From music dot serializers import album serializer. So we have imported both of them. Now there is a lot of stuff that the Django has something called an ORM that helps us access and fetch data from the database. So looking at the Django ORM docs, we have okay, I'll list all of these URLs and the important documentation articles that I'm referring here after this, and I'll send it to the group. So, for example, we Django provides a way of making queries to the database. So, for example, what this is what we're doing. So we can do. We have imported the model. So now to fetch an album, what we can do is create a variable named albums, album dot objects dot all. This will fetch all of the albums that we have in the database. So now if we print out the albums variable, see this will return a query set with all of the albums that we have. Similarly, if we want to do it for the tracks, because we have multiple tracks, this will be a better example. So if we say tracks is equal to track dot objects dot all, and we print out tracks, we have two different track objects. So this is fetching all of the things that we have. And now, for example, if we want to just fetch a single track, and we know according to which parameter do we want to fetch. For example, as Sir asked for IDs, we can say track dot objects dot get. The get function will only return a single object there, single database object. It can't fetch many. So what we can do is we can specify the ID equal to 1. And now if we fetch this will only return one object for the track. And we fetch this by the unique ID that every track object has, and Django by default supplies to it. So here, now let's see how serializers help us. So we can do album underscore serializer. This is just a variable name. So album serializer, and we can initialize it with the album that we had fetched. It is a query set. Okay. So albums, we can see we have a query set of albums. Now to get one of them, there are a lot of functions that Django provides. Like there will be there are manager methods like get and first and all of that. All of this is listed in the Django docs. So let's use the first thing because we just need the first output from this. So album is equal to albums dot first. So this will just return the first result that. Okay. So this will return the first. Now let's initialize the album serializer. Album serializer, and we go and we initialized it with this. So as you can see, it prints it out like this. And if we want the data in a JSON format or in a dictionary format, if I just do album underscore serializer dot data, it gave me album name and band name. We had excluded the creation date from the fields that we can see, so it didn't output it into the data. But if we now want the creation field release date, we can just add release date here, and if we redo all of this in a new shell instance, we'll have the band name here, we'll have the create release date here. Let's just do it quickly. From music.model serializer, and again let's initialize it. So we'll fetch only one album this time. So album dot objects dot get id equal to 1, and then we can initialize it with as is equal to album serializer, and we initialize it with the album variable. And now if we just print out the data dot data, so we uh, okay, I misspelled release date, that's why. So I'm just redoing all of the stuff because I made a mistake. So we can initialize the album serializer, and we can now look at the data. So now we have the release date also. So we can specify the fields that we want to output in the fields variable of the meta class in a serializer. So now to create, now we can also fetch the tracks that an album has listed. So we can do here only, we can see album dot track underscore set dot all. So this will show all of the tracks that are linked to this particular album only. So this is how we can reference the foreign keyed fields. Is Does anyone have any doubts? So moving forward with this, is that uh, is everyone clear? Am I going too fast or too slow? Does anyone have any issues? So moving forward, uh, so now let's create a basic API that can help us fetch all of these albums. So to when we'll also create a serializer for the tracks. So we can do class track serializer, serializers dot model serializer again that we did. We can do the model, and we need to import it. The model will be track. And now here we can do one more thing, that we can specify that we need all the fields in the model by saying underscore underscore all underscore underscore. Sorry, yeah. So we can do this, and this will just show us all the fields. So now we'll create a view for the API that we want. So here now there is a lot of stuff, and because this session is a bit limited, I can't go into depth into everything, but the docs are a good reference for all of this, and you can read. So for example, we are talking about views, and Django REST framework explains the views properly. So and I'm expecting that everyone has gone through the basic Django course before this. So here, so everyone understands basics of views, or does someone not know views? So I'll explain that too. Okay, so let's move ahead. So creating views now, we can create two types of views. One is a class-based view, and another is a function-based view. So here we'll be creating mostly class-based views because our functionality is not too complicated, and Django provides a lot of helpful resources that can ease our development process. So uh, for for example, we also need to create an API to list the albums that are in the database. So what we can do is we'll create a class called list albums, and we And we again similarly we need to import the REST frameworks, uh, views, import API view, because we need to create an API, so we need to define this as an API view. So this we need to inherit the API view class, and the API view class by default provides us two different uh, methods that we need to override. One is a get and one is post. So get and post methods are actually HTTP methods that are defined, and the get method is always used for fetching data from the database, and it cannot edit the database. It is always a read only method. Post is used to edit the databases, or it is used to send some data from the client to the server, and the get method is used to fetch data from the server to the client. So and the get, as I said earlier, get is always read only, but post can make changes in the database. So in this list albums view, what we'll do is we'll create a method called get that has the self parameter, uh, and it also has the request, because in Django everything has a request. So because we are making web servers, so everything is based on HTTP, and HTTP has requests. So these objects are used to specify the details uh, of the data that we want to get. So this is a so here we are defining the get method, and here because it is a list albums view, we'll just fetch all of the albums that we have. So what we can do is albums is equal to uh, we need to import the model also here from music dot models import album. Here we can do album dot objects dot all, because we want all of the albums that are listed in the database. And now we can use the album serializer that we have to convert it into a JSON object. So what we'll do is albums underscore data is equal to album serializer, and this got auto imported. And now we can do the uh, we can give it albums, and we need to specify that there are many albums in this. So here we'll have an no, I wasn't speaking. So this will have a lot, because we want multiple data. So we'll have an album serializer, and we'll do albums, and we'll specify many equal to true. And now we can just return a response that is provided by Django REST, and we can just return the response, and we can just say albums underscore data, and we'll give it a status code of 200, and a status code of 200 means okay. Just give me a minute. So yeah, moving forward, creating the view. we have created a very basic view uh, for Aditya, for the REST framework not being recognized in your IDE. Have you installed the Django REST framework pip
Yeah, yeah,
package that as we did earlier?
yeah, yeah. I did that.
Yes, do as Nishkarsh has said that you can change the interpreter. Are you using VS Code?
Yes.
Okay. So for VS Code, what we'll have to do is, uh, so we'll, for example, we'll open the project. So it is in my code. Okay. So I have opened the project in VS Code, and now what we have to do is, oh, here we can select the interpreter.
Okay, start. I think it
I
works on
don't
some
use those.
extension, but
Yeah, it is the Python official extensions that
hmm,
I have them installed. Uh, I'll get back to you. I'll help you out with this after this session.
Okay.
So here in the URL patterns, and then we'll do this. We can so yeah, to map this, what we'll do, we'll just import it from the views file that we have already list underscore albums. So this has mapped this to the URL slash, and now we also need to change the base set urls.py file that we have in the project, and we can go into path, and we'll say albums and do slash uh, and then we can include the URLs that we created in the project, the app called music. So we'll first need to import the include function, and we'll say include music.urls, and there should be a string music thing. So now we can go to localhost 8000, and we can do albums. And okay, I have made a mistake in making the URLs here. We don't need a slash here, we can just keep it empty. And as we can see, we have a list of the albums as listed here. And now even if we take a look at HTTP request, and now as we are just we defined the get method here, so we have get, and what we'll do is http colon slash slash localhost 8000 slash albums. So now if we send this, as we can see, we have a JSON response, and which is formatted properly, and now it is returning an array directly, so we can modify all of this as per our liking. So if we go into the views file, rather than returning the data directly here, what we can do is we can wrap this in a data dictionary, and we can do something like this, and now the response will be a dictionary with with data and an array of dictionaries again. So this is how we can create a basic API, and now we look into how we can create a post API. So for post APIs, what we need to do is so here, similarly as we created a get function, we can create a post function here. We can do self and request. And now the request plays a very major part here, because we'll extract the data that we need to change. For example, we'll here only just be changing the album name. So what we can do is the data that we get from the request, we can access it by doing request.data. And now if we want to for example get the album name, we can just say album underscore name is equal to data, and as this is the dictionary, we have to index into it. And for example, we will provide a name that will get me the value from the JSON that is in the request with the key album name. So here this is, and we'll also need the the ID of the album that we want to edit. So what we can do is we can also so we need to fetch that also. So we can say album underscore ID is equal to data album underscore ID, and now we'll try and get the album with the ID that was specified in the request. So what we'll do, we'll wrap this in a try except block to catch errors. So what we'll do is album is equal to album dot objects dot get id equal to album underscore id, except we know there are certain errors and exceptions that Django provides. So we will catch the error that is thrown when there is so we are getting the album with a specified id. If there is nothing with that id in the database, we can the Django will throw an error called does not exist. So we can catch that, and we can return a response that has a message inside it that says uh, album does not exist, and we'll give this a status code which is not 200, because 200 is for an okay or a valid request. So there are a lot of status codes, so we can just from REST framework also provides statuses. So what we can do is we'll import the status codes. So this is a better way. We can just explicitly specify as we did earlier here and specify it to a status 200, but it is better that we use this in enumerator that has HTTP. So we with any errors that are caused due to user error will return a 4 something starting with a 4. So HTTP 400, because it's a bad request. The request is not formatted as we want. So we can do this, and now if we fetch the album, if the fetching is a success, the try block will still continue. So what we can do is we can return a response here, and we also need to serialize this. So album underscore cs is equal to album serializer initializer album, and we'll just do data is equal to album underscore s dot data. So first we got this, and now what we can do is we need to change the album name, right? So what we can do is album dot album underscore name is equal to the new album name that we want to set, and we can just save it dot save. So this will change the album name in the database. And now after changing it, what we can do is we'll create the album serializer now with the new data. So what we can do is album serializer and initialize it with the new album that we have, and now we'll return a response that has a message that will be saying uh, album updated, and we'll also send the data of the updated album. So album underscore s dot data. So here you can put in whatever you want. This is how we are doing it, and as this was what we intended to happen, so we'll give it a status code of http 200 OK, and I have misspelled status. So here now we have a post object, a post request ready. So now how to call this? As we have specified that we need to send album ID and album name in the request, in Postman what we can do is we'll create a new request, and we'll go into post, we'll create a post request, and what we'll do is again as we are still posting it on the album's URL, and in the body of the postman request, what we can do is we'll say we'll send raw data in form of JSON, and we said album underscore ID. So album underscore ID, and we know it is we have an album ID name, album ID one in it. Album name is, or this is what we want to change it to. So what we can do is changed album name. So now we can send this, and there was a runtime error. We must have done something. Okay. So for post request, you always need to uh, append a slash at the end. So now if I append a slash, see we can see that it says album updated and change the album name. Now if we even go to the if we just fetch this again using this API, we can see that the album name changed here. So this is how we create a post request. Does anyone have any doubts? Okay.
Very good, Raj. Go ahead.
Okay, so what we can now moving ahead, uh, we also for the projects that we have to create right now, we also need authentication. Now this is a very big jump right now. So if you don't understand a lot of stuff, it's fine. I'll be there to help you later also. But I'll just give you a demo of how to create authentication and protected views. So here we'll be creating a function-based
Also,
views.
Raj, I think there is a confusion that in case somebody sends to change something in the album, he should be look. Anybody should not do that. Okay? Only right person should be able to do that. So
Yes,
how
sir.
to
So this
protect
was
that part?
just so that is what I'm going ahead with right now. So this was just a demo of how to create a post request. So now we'll protect the same post request uh, and disallow people who don't have access from updating the uh, albums.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Yes. Sorry, I had muted my mic. So moving forward, for having APIs that are protected, what generally is used is something known as JWT tokens, that is JSON Web Tokens. So these are tokens that are issued by the backend server that identifies that okay, this user is in my database, and that will have to be sent every time we want to access a protected route. In protected routes are routes that no only certain people should be able to access, and they not everyone can't access them. So we have created the post request here. We can also, so now to protect this post request, what we need to do first is we need to set up the JWT authentication setup. For that, we'll use another package that is called Simple JWT, and it is an extension to the Django REST framework. We first used Django and we extended it using the Django REST framework, and now we're extending the functionality of Django REST framework by using plugin into this Python module, and this installs it, and we'll again pip freeze and find the version, and we'll add it to uh, the requirements file. So as we have these two, we also have this, and now we have added it. Now similarly, as we set up the getting started and the installation, so we have done this already. Now we need to configure our project. So these guys are updating the REST framework settings that we hadn't. Way I'm writing it because this is predefined in REST framework, and it will again be a dictionary. So what are we are currently changing the authentication classes, that how authentication is managed by REST framework. So what we need to do is we need to have a key called default authentication, classes, and these all have to be in capitals, and this will again be an array or a tuple, whatever you want. So what we first, there are 2 to 3 basic authentications that are required. So we'll add them first. So to add them, that is just rest underscore framework dot authentication dot basic authentication, and rest framework dot authentication dot session authentication. And now we'll add the simple JWT authentication uh, plugin that we have installed. So what we'll do is rest framework underscore. I also don't remember all of this. So I'll also periodically refer the docs. Dot simple JWT dot authentication dot JWT authentication. So this has added the JWT authentication stuff to our project, and now we'll also need to add REST framework simple JWT to our installed apps as we did for the REST framework thing. So here what we'll do, we'll again do REST framework simple JWT, and this is how we configure simple JWT. Now what we'll do, we'll first need to verify and authenticate users. So we need login routes. So what we'll do, we'll create another app similar to the music app. This is just to keep the code separate. So what we'll do is python manage.py start app. I we should not name it auth because it might conflict with something. So I'll just name it users. So we'll go to users. So now, as we go to users, now we'll create a view for logging in. And now we'll use something called a function-based views, and also we'll set up tokens, and we'll create tokens. So first, what we'll do, we'll create a function called login. Again, everything. This is a HTTP request. This will handle HTTP requests. So we need to pass in the request. So from the request, and also this will also be an API. So again, we need to import REST framework dot decorators import API. So this is nothing but a wrapper around this function that will specify what that this will be an API view, and what we need to specify is the method. So always logging in will always send the user credentials to the server. So we need to specify that this will be a post request. So by doing this, and now what we'll do, similarly that we did in the albums post request, we'll first access the data, and then we'll fetch the data that is required to us. Data, and inside the data we'll fetch the username, and similarly we get password, and we'll get the password from here. And now Django has a very good authentication framework, and we'll be just using that to help us. So for example, what we'll do is we'll first import the default user model that Django has from Django contrib.auth import models import user. And now we have imported this, and there are also some helpful stuff that Django provides. So we also need to import that so this will help us check the whether a user exists with the username and password that we have provided. So what we'll do, because Django does not store passwords in plain text in the database, so it needs to hash the password, and for that Django provides a helper function that is called as authenticate. Auth import authenticate. this is a function that Django provides. And what does this function do is we need to uh, call the function. We need to provide the username and password that we have got from the request. And what will this function do, as this function will take the username and password, and it will return a user if the if such a user exists with the respective username and passwords, and if not, it will return none. So what we do is, if we check if user exists, and if the user exists, what we have to do is we need to create a token for them. So to create tokens, what we do is from REST framework dot simple jwt dot tokens import refresh token. So JWT tokens are of two types: refresh tokens and access tokens. Currently, we'll be just using access tokens. Refresh tokens are used for more complicated functionalities, and it is actually more secure and should be used. But currently, for our scope, it is very complicated. Like, we have just started learning Django REST, so we'll just use access tokens right now. So if we have a user, what we'll do is we publish tokens by calling refresh token dot for user. So this publishes tokens for them, and what we'll do is return a response with uh, a message that says logged in, or rather logged in, we should say verified, and then we'll provide the access token. Tokens, and we'll convert it into a tokens x token. We'll do, okay, we need to import the response from REST framework dot response, import response. And if the user does not exist, we need to return a response that says invalid username or password, because that is the only case when the user does not exist. So we'll say invalid username and password, and we'll give it a status of uh, we again need to import the statuses from REST framework info status, and we'll do status dot http underscore 401 underscore unauthorized. And so let's test this out. But to test this out, first we need another user. So what I'll do is we'll go to the admin page, as we we have the server. Okay. So the localhost 8000/admin, and now here we can see users. This is the super user that we have created. We should generally not use super users for testing out all of this. So I'll create a new user. So I'll say the username is Rajpur, and the password, I'll keep it something simple. So we created this. So we have a new user. So let's test this out on Postman. First, we need to map the URL to a view. So what we'll do, again similarly, we'll create a urls.py file, and then from we'll first need to import the path function that we used earlier. So we'll go from django.urls import path, and we'll create the URL patterns array that has the path, and we'll say login, and that will be mapped to from users.views import the login view. So we'll map it to the login function, and we'll create name it login. And now we'll also need to include this app in the settings, as we did for the music app. So we'll go to the settings.py file, And here in the custom apps, we'll also need to add the users app, the users.apps.users config. Adding this, uh, now we can check if the server is running with no issues. And now we'll create another request. So we'll create another HTTP request that says post. And I also did not add it to the URLs. So here, as we included the music app, we'll also need to include the auth. I'll call it auth here, and we'll say include users.urls. So this is giving an error. It just might be because I have named the variable wrong. So now let's check if the server is running. So the server is running now. So what I'll do, I'll create another post request that is auth/login. That is what we named it. And to the body, I'll add a JSON script, a JSON request, and say username is what I created, Raj underscore clerk, and the password is, now here it will be a plain text password. Okay, I might have made some mistakes. So I'll go into the docs and look at the create. Okay, this is the mistake I have done. So we'll go to the views folder that we have, and here I have made this mistake. It is a dot access token rather than a dictionary. So I guess this should work now. Yes. So see, we have a message that said verified, and this is a token. So this token we'll have to use forward for accessing protected routes. So let's create another very simple route that will be protected. So let's see. So what we'll do. So to protect a view, what we have to do is we need to use another decorator, that is permission classes. So this defines the permissions that are this defines the permission that a user should have in order to access a route. So what we'll do is permission classes, and there is a default permission that REST framework provides, that is called REST framework dot permissions, and we need to import the is authenticated permission. So what does this do is we need to first let's add this permission. Let's create the view first and then I'll explain how this works. And again, this is an API view. So what we'll do is, and this is just a very simple view that I'm creating for just demonstration purposes. And I'll also call it protected view. And this is the request. And now what happens is this request will only be we can only get this view if we provide an access token in a specified location. And because we are using access tokens and refresh tokens, what we'll have to do is we'll copy this, and first let's complete this view. So what we'll do is return a very simple response that says message this is a protected view. Now let's map this to the URLs. And we'll give it another path, that is, I'll just call it protected, and that will be also the protected view function that I have to import. And this we give it a name called protected. So again, the server reloaded with no errors, and now what we'll do is we'll go into Postman and we'll create another request, that is a get request. And what we'll do is it is in the auth app. So what we'll do is it was called protected, right? So we'll do this, and here in the authorization tab, we'll need to give it a bearer token. And the bearer token value should be the access token that we got. And now if I send this request, this is a protected view. But if I remove this token and then I try this, just a second. Might be an error with the settings that I've configured. Just a second. I might have forgotten to configure a setting or something. Just a second. Give me a second. I need to look into the, because even if I'm not sending the uh, still giving a response. Just let me look into it. Okay, I'll see. Let's just check. Just give me a second. So yeah, it was just an error. Uh, we have to place the permission classes decorator that we have. I'll share my screen again. Okay. So this permission classes decorator, we have to place it below the API view. That is what my error was. So now if I don't provide the authentication tokens here, see it returns a 403 forbidden request, that is authentic credentials were not provided. So this is all that we had. We'll mostly have to use for the projects that we have to do. So if anyone has any doubts, they can ask. But I am done with all the content I had.
Thank you very much, Raj. So I have two questions. I think that is also related to the one question that Soumya has asked earlier. The question is how to add images or videos in the database, something like that.
So images, for images and videos, everything is a file. So in the Django docs, if we look here, we can go to the model field reference, and so if we go to the model field reference, we have a field called file field. So what we can do is we can have a file field, and this will we have different methods of configuring this. What we can do is we can see an upload to folder, and it will call an upload to folder, uh, upload to, it will upload it to a folder called uploads. And that folder, what actually will be done is, if we go into the settings.py file, there is a static URL here. We'll have to define something else also, which is media underscore, was it root or media underscore? It was media underscore root. And we'll have to call, generally it is named media and followed by a slash, or in we can also it's media slash. And what we'll have to do is we'll have to create a directory here named media. So all of the files that we upload to the database, so it is not actually being stored in the database, it will be stored in as a file here. And for example, this upload to, so what this will do is this will create another folder inside this media folder and call it uploads, because we named this uploads here. So inside this folder, that file that you put will be uploaded, and we can fetch that file later.
Okay. Okay.
So there's also image field option that you can just directly use. Or what you can also do is just like store it through normal commands and then store the path to that file as a char field itself.
Okay. So, any more questions? So, Raj, one more question. Uh, so, let's assume that I want to create an API that takes two values and give, for example, very simple thing, summation of the two numbers means does some kind of processing behind, because till now we have seen that how we can take the things from the database and put the things into the database. We have not seen any processing part. So let's assume I want to create an API where I'm sending two numbers and it is going to return A plus B, something like that only.
Okay, so let's do as you're saying. So to do that, we'll, as we have been doing for the other stuff, we'll have to create a view for the same. So let's go into the music view. I'm just using this project because it has a lot of the setup done already. So what we'll do, we'll we'll create another function here. Let's just add some space. It's clearer. So we'll do, it is an API. So we'll do API view, and this can be get or data index num1, the two numbers that we'll provide in the request. And we'll do data index num2, and now we'll have the result, which is nothing but num1 plus num2. And to make our app more safer, like we can put a lot of checks here. For example, we convert this into an int again, like we are just adding two integers, and we'll wrap this in a try except block, uh, which will give a value error if the number, if whatever we provided is not an uh, number. This is just ways of making the app more secure and resilient to errors. uh, Please provide numbers, and we'll do a status of 400. And now let's make the result, and we'll return the result now because we have added the two numbers. and we'll just do response. Result is the result, and if we do this, and now let's map it to a URL. Let's call it add, and from the views we'll import that function that we did, add to nums, and what we'll do, add to nums is here, and we call it add this. So we have mapped it here, and this should now create an API that will help us. So now let's go to, because we put it inside the albums and add, we'll do this to the authorization because we protected the view. We'll do this, and num1 was 2 and num2 is 9, and other than a number, this will say please provide numbers because we caught that error here. We can also even send numbers in form of a string because we are converting it into an integer, and this adds it up. So this is how we can use
Excellent.
that.
Very good. All right. Thank you. I think it is very good. So, any questions from any audience? Done. Thank you, Raj. I think you have you have explained everything with a very high clarity, and I'm very happy to see that this kind of session we can conduct with help of our students. I'm very happy with this session. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. Let's thank the speaker. You can put claps and etc. Thank you, everybody, for your time, and we can then again meet again tomorrow to discuss this. One assignment that I wanted from all of you, that please make a small Word file and convert it to PDF and send it to me. And on the group, I think send it on the group. I will find out your names from there, and then see that how you are doing. One more announcement: everybody is here. We were thinking to conduct your group discussion on Tuesday. So, but I think let me plan it accordingly, and I will provide you that how to do that. Okay, it would be online only. So a group of 5 or 6 people. So let me just try to figure it out, and then we can have it sometime, maybe tomorrow or maybe day after tomorrow. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. No questions? Bye bye.